I have been a speech language pathologist for the last 12 years, and I've worked across the spectrum from birth to 21. And I've loved that. And what I've been able to do is switch from like 1 year at a time. Basically, I've had different contract jobs. I've had long-term sub jobs in a bunch of different districts with EI, CPSC, that kind of thing. And it's been great. I've had access to all the benefits of teachers and other therapists. I didn't take advantage of retirement anything because I was overwhelmed. It sounds insane to me. 401k, 403b, 457. I kind of was like, I know there's a pension at the end of the line. I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to focus on my job and figure that all out later. And then when COVID happened, I had some time at home and I thought, I was honestly a little depressed in the beginning because I also was in a low income school with a lot of kids with a lot of needs and a lot of responsibilities at home with their siblings they had to take care of. And school wasn't a priority once they were home. It wasn't going to work that way. So I wanted to find something I could do productive that would make me feel better about having control of something. So I started researching my own retirement, and I at first felt awful, like Liz was saying. Like once you start learning some of this stuff, it's like, oh, I really should have been paying attention. I really should have figured this out. But then the more I learned and the more books I was reading and podcasts I was listening to, I realized everyone needs to hear the basics, at least get a plan for themselves with the basics and then run from there, because there's a lot out there to trick us into, get us into kind of bad annuity plans or those kind of things with whoever happens to come to the school and help us get signed up, that aren't great options. And then there are a lot of options out there that we could really take advantage of and do fantastically well if we knew what we were looking at. So I started listening to podcasts, and I heard David, the budget teacher, on one of the podcasts, Teach and Retire Rich. And I wanted to invite him to see if he would be willing to talk to a bunch of the speech group, because I posted a question on the speech pathologist in the school settings Facebook group, just asking, like, what are you guys doing? What's going on with your retirements? What do you guys think about everything that's going on? And I found a lot of people in the same position, like not really sure what they were looking at. And some people had some ideas, and some people knew they were, investing in something, but didn't have details on exactly what it was or what they were paying. So I invited David on. He graciously accepted because, he is getting started on doing this kind of independent consulting, and it just was perfect to get him in here right now. And we have a few other guests the next couple of days, and I've reached out to a few more, and it seems like a lot of people are willing to talk to us. So I'm just going to keep it going, recording everything and getting it out there for anyone that wants to and has access to it. David, so I don't know how familiar you are with speech language pathologists, but a lot of us work in schools, and that's kind of where I started advertising this idea of having the Zoom session. But a lot of people work in private practice or in hospitals, so we're kind of all over the place. So it's not like a one size fits all as far as us with retirement and all those options. But
I'll be honest with you, I had to do some research prior to tonight or this afternoon to figure out exactly. Like I've heard of speech language pathologists, and I've actually got one in my extended family that, but I didn't know. I didn't know where everybody was located. I didn't know that there were some in hospitals and some in schools. But so I did look at that a little bit and try to figure out, what the different options were.
So I'm going to pass this over to you, David. If you could tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into this, how you started teaching, and then how you got into this financial consulting.
Sure. So I'm going to start, I guess, by I've got a little presentation here. I'll just flip over here. All right. Can everybody see that? I guess it's the first question. Okay. So, to answer your question, it really started a long time ago, but I guess, a couple of years ago. But why are we here? To begin with, it's because we want to learn more about our money, and so many of the things out there seem so complicated. But my entire the last couple of years has been trying to dive into this world and figure out how to uncomplicate everything around money. And so I'm here today to talk to you more about the basics and kind of go through some of those things for you. And then Dan and Scott tomorrow are going to be talking about the 457s and 403Bs, which I think is going to be an incredible, opportunity to learn from them. And then, as you said, another guest, Grumpus Maximus, talking about pensions and everything along those lines. And those, Some of those things are, I feel okay about them, but, I'm not as qualified as other people to talk about them. So today I'm going to stick with kind of the basics of what I do well, and that's budgeting. So this is my quote that I kind of like to start things off with, but you are one decision away from a totally different life. And for me, that really starts kind of my story was, and I'll flip to the next page here to kind of go through my why story. So for about 4 years ago, my wife and we got engaged to get married, and we were both teachers at the time. And we were living a life that we were living very paycheck to paycheck. And we didn't have a ton of debt, but we had student loan debts, car debt. We had our mortgage, not so much on the credit card sides, but we just felt like we were not in control. And we started to talk about, like, what did we want our life to look like? And what did we want our future to look like? And we knew that we wanted to have a family someday. And we knew that right at this point, we didn't know where that money was going to come from in order to, like, send a kid to daycare or to do different things that we wanted to do along the way. And so it was 3 years ago, almost exactly, August 1st, we started our family budget. And it was tough. And the problem is that we didn't have anybody guiding us. We didn't have we basically were just figuring it out on our own as we were going. And we made a ton of mistakes. Oh my gosh. Probably the biggest one right off the bat that I'll share with you is that this was my idea and I was all about it. And I'd been reading and researching and doing all this stuff, but I forgot to get my wife involved in the process. And so I was just like, I know this is the thing that we need to do. Let's do it. And she went along with it, but she didn't buy into the vision quite as much as what I probably should have showed her some things or brought her in on talking about the budget, different things like that. So it was not the best way for me to set that up. But I've since learned, as I'm hoping we all do, that you learn as things go. And one of the big things that I found was that communication is just such a gigantic part of everything, especially in marriage, but also whenever you're dealing with your budget, like, you have to be talking. And so that first year, by the time we got to the end of it, we realized, like, wow, we're actually doing some pretty good stuff. And we had a budget that was under control. We started to, then you can start to look at what you're spending and say, like, is this actually something that I enjoy spending on? And if it's not, you get rid of it. And so that kind of went through the first year. We ended up paying off a ton of debt. We started to kind of turn our life around as far as financially. And other people started to take notice of this. And, basically working in a school environment, everybody knows everything about everybody else. And so, people started to see us and they're like, wow, can you tell me what you're doing? And so I'd sit down with somebody and talk to them. And my thing is that it always revolves around the budget. So you can't invest more in your 403B or 457 like they're going to talk about tomorrow, unless you have a budget and you know what you can put into that. Your pension's pretty much set, but then you're living your life trying to, get to the next paycheck or trying to have some fun in, maybe a couple months of vacation, whatever the case may be. It always comes back to revolving around the budget. And so, that second year, as we started the budget, again, we talked about what we did well, what we needed to work on. And we realized that we could start funding a lot more money into those 457s and 403Bs than we had been previously. So we started doing that. And a little while into this, we realized that I enjoy helping other people with their budgets. And so we kind of talked about this a little bit before the call, but this year in March, I actually quit my teaching job. I resigned from it so that way I could go into this full time. And this has not been something that my family has ever really thought about, like business wise. I come from my parents are two teachers, grandparents are teachers, aunts, uncles. I've got so many teachers in my family. It's ridiculous. And so going off on our own was kind of a scary idea. But when we looked at the budget, because again, it all comes back to that, we realized that we had whittled our way down to where we could live on one paycheck, which was hers, which was going to be hers. And then I could focus on trying to build up this business. Now, in the process, we've had to stop some of the other investments and stuff like that. But again, the budget, by having that, it gives you choices because you can see where your money's going. You can see what it's doing. And then you can make some choices and some options and different things like that, that maybe you couldn't have beforehand. So I do have a finance degree from way back in, I graduated college in 2008 with a finance degree. And so I like to say that I'm a mind in finance with the heart of a teacher because, everybody knows that, well, in the classroom, whether it's teaching language or teaching math or teaching Spanish, whatever the case may be, when we work with kids, we have to be able to understand how to take a complex topic and break it down into simple terms. And it's one of the things that I think that the world of finance needs is less complexity and more breaking it down into simple, understandable topics. And so that's what I've tried to make my business, whether it's talking on a podcast or talking in a webinar or working with clients one-on-one, is how can we take a complex topic and break it down into simple terms that we can understand? Because, and I think part of the reason is that the financial world tries to make things complicated because they want to keep, everything inside their little bubble. But the truth is that it doesn't have to be that way. So number one thing that I think is that you have to have a budget. And a budget, I hear so often people will tell me a budget is just so restrictive. And in my opinion, a budget doesn't restrict you. It actually sets you free. The reason why is because whenever you know exactly where your money's going, then you can make some choices about that. And you say, okay, instead of having my money go to this, I want it to go to this. But without having some knowledge of that ahead of time, you could be all over the place. So I do believe that having a budget set up is the first step that every person needs to have on their financial journey. It's the first thing that you've got to do. So I'm going to spend just a moment and kind of talk about that. So whenever I'm talking about budgeting, I've got 2 slides here of budgeting basics that I believe are the kind of the ways to get that going. And it really starts with, at the very beginning, that you have to track your expenses. So what I mean by that is what I have my clients do, what I did myself, is I go back and look from about 3 months ago, maybe even more, 3 to 6 months back, and just start tracking every single thing that you spent money on. And it can be tedious, and also it's super emotional. And trust me, I know what that's like because, like I said, I did it myself. It's not fun to go back and say, oh my gosh, look how much money I spent a couple months ago on going out to eat. That's usually a big one for people, or the grocery store, or whatever the case may be for you. I was that way also. And we were looking at this, my wife and I, and it's like, oh my gosh, we're just wasting money more or less. But now it didn't feel like wasting at the time. But that's essentially what we were doing, because when we stopped and looked back on it, it didn't add any value to our life. We like those quick, fast food trips or whatever the case may be. You don't look back on that and be like, I'm really glad that I did that. No, I don't think most people would say that. A lot of times it's about convenience, and you do want it at the time, but looking back a couple months later, especially if you're putting it onto credit cards, or if you're not making as much financial progress as you want to, then looking back at that stuff, you say, it wasn't really that important to me. So after I tracked all my expenses, I broke them into categories. And I usually have a bunch of categories that I keep, and, groceries for one, car gasoline or fuel, whatever you call it in different areas of the country. Going out to eat, we looked at how much we're spending on our mortgage. We looked at the electricity and gas. We looked at every single bill, cell phones, cable and internet. Now we've added in like daycare and needs for the house for us and for our daughter, like diapers and different things like that. And every single purchase, though, that we make now, when we make it, we can say, is this something that we want to do with our money? And if it's not, then we don't make that purchase. And if it is, then we do make it, and we don't feel bad about any purchase that we make. And that's probably been one of the biggest things that I can say, is that by taking the ownership back, we don't have to worry about making sure that it fits our budget. We say, here's what we have in this category, and then go spend it freely because we have it. So we have a vacation fund, which, by the way, keeps growing because we can't go anywhere. And so now our vacation fund is looking pretty good. So whenever those things, whenever the world opens up a little bit, we're going to be able to go enjoy a nice vacation, and we're going to be able to do it guilt-free without having that. And before the budget, we would go do things and be like, oh man, what's this going to look like on our credit card statement next month? Are we going to be able to cover that? And the honest truth is that we didn't know. And so by not knowing it, you start to feel that stress just over and over and over. Another thing, as far as the basics of budgeting, is to consider sinking funds. And whenever I say sinking funds, these are the funds that happen, that might only happen once a year. The big one that I talk about a lot on this, actually there's two of them that I bring up, and they both happened at about the same time, but it's property taxes and Christmas. Now, I don't know actually the honest truth to this. I don't know if property taxes are something that every state deals with. In Missouri, we have to pay for owning the car that we already have. So every year I have to write the government a check, about $600, maybe $700 for mine and my wife's car. And, the first couple of years that we were living together and kind of as we were getting engaged and all that stuff, this would happen. And I would get mad. I'm not going to lie to you. I would just get mad about it. And it's like, well, this thing pops up out of nowhere every December. Well, the honest truth is that I know it's coming every December, or the bill comes in November, it's due by the end of December. And so it's like, I knew it was coming. It's not a secret. The government's not trying to get you. It's every December I have to pay this bill. The exact same thing with Christmas. I celebrate Christmas. Maybe some people do and don't, and that's okay. But there might be something else that you don't, that you celebrate that's different than Christmas. But either way, I know that Christmas is coming every December, on December 25th, as a matter of fact. I can even pin the day down. And I know that I'm going to have to buy some presents. Now, how much am I going to buy? That's a question that I can ask myself. And what kind of presents? I don't know. I'm going to try to get good deals throughout the year. But the thing is that what I do now is I set a limit of money for every single month. That's part of my budget. And so I'll be honest with you. I do $100 a month. So every single month is $100. And maybe some months I don't spend anything out of that fund. Maybe some months we have a birthday pop up. So I just have a gifts fund. It's not necessarily Christmas, but if a birthday pops up, we buy something, it's taken care of. When the end of the year comes, Christmas time, we have a pot of money there that's ready for Christmas presents. That has been a game changer in our world. The same thing with car repairs, house repairs, vacations is another one in that. These things, we know they're going to happen. I can tell you that if you own a car, you're going to have a car repair. It might not be tomorrow. It might not be next week. It may not even be a year from now. But guess what? At some point in time, you're going to have to replace the tires. You're going to have to get some work done on the engine. You're going to have to change the oil at the bare minimum. Why not have funds set up for that ahead of time so when it does happen, you don't have to worry about it. You got a pot of money sitting there. Now, sometimes, like let's say that you have a massive house expense. Maybe your sinking fund can't cover that. Your category that you have pre-set up can't cover that. Well, at least you have some money there that's going towards that expense. And then hopefully you have an emergency fund as well. I do believe that an emergency fund is a very, very important thing to have. And maybe after doing all of those things, it still doesn't cover it. Okay, maybe you have to finance it a little bit, but at least bare minimum, you've had some money that can go towards that and you're not starting completely from scratch. For example, if you had a $10,000 roof repair or a new roof, I guess, not just a repair, new roof, let's say it costs $10,000. If you've got $2,000 in your home repair fund and you've got another $3,000 in your emergency fund, well, now you're only having to, put on to financing $5,000. It can basically change your life in that way. So those are three of the basics. I'm going to go to the next slide here. And by the way, I get very, very passionate about budgeting. So if you don't feel the excitement the same way that I do, I'm sorry, but it's something that I really love. So some budgeting basics. So a couple more things. Number one, you have to spend less on your budget. Like that's including everything than what you make. It's just, that's part of the rules is like, if you're making $3,000, then including even with all of the sinking funds. So you have to be thinking about, your Christmas and your car and all those things that we just talked about. If those aren't included in that budget, then you're going to be setting yourself up for failure. But if they are included, you have to make sure that the amount, when all of those things are added together, is less than what you bring home. And, you know, I've had some very successful looking friends, and this is a story that I like to share a lot, but I've had some very successful looking friends that I know make upwards of $100,000 a year. Some of those friends, I'm very confident, spend about $110,000 a year, right? So they're overextending themselves. I also know a ton of teachers who probably make in the $30,000 to $40,000 to $50,000 range, and speech language pathologists as well. So I'm not leaving you out of that. School district employees, there we go, who make $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year and live on $20,000 a year. My opinion, they are way more successful than the person that looks successful and is over leveraging themselves. So that's the power behind the budget, is that you can see that. Are you staying within your numbers? Because if you're not, really at some point it's going to get you. And if you're not considering those sinking funds, at some point it's going to get you, because you might say, well, I make $3,000 a month and I only spend $2,800. Well, that might be the case for this month, and it might be the case for the next month. But if you have that car repair or that house repair or that thing that pops up that you weren't expecting, maybe you're not prepared, and those $200 a month that you've been saving, that's not enough. So you got to really look at all of your potential expenses. And that's one of the things that I have my clients go through with me. And it's one of the things that I did myself too. Next thing that we talk about quite a bit is value-based spending. This is like probably my number one thing out of all of the budgeting. I love this concept. And the main idea behind it is that don't spend money on crap that you don't necessarily want. Okay. And it's such a thing that we do as Americans and I'm not trying to preach from the top of a soapbox, because I was there. I did the same thing. One of the things that we've talked about, especially since coronavirus, when we're sitting at home, there's not a whole lot to do. But my wife and I, we're not really TV watchers. And we've had this TV package for forever. And we said, what are we doing with this TV package? Do we even care about it? Like, we're not watching it. No. Okay, so let's get rid of it. So we canceled cable over from, I think we did in April. But it was one of those things where we were home and we realized we're home all day, every day, and we're still not turning on the TV. Well, we obviously don't care about it. Let's just get rid of the thing. So we did that. Value-based spending to me means spend on things that you care about. If you love going out to eat, go out to eat. Do it. If you love to travel, go travel. See the world. I love to travel. Now, I understand though that I make a certain amount of money and that my travel has to stay within those constraints. Otherwise, I'm going to be in debt, and I much rather be out of debt than travel. That's me personally. I know that what I'm looking at overall on my budget, I can look at every single line item, and I do, and my wife does as well. And we look at it now that we have it set and now that we know about it and we know where we're at, we can look at it and say, does this thing bring us any joy? It's kind of like the, what's that lady's name? Marie Kondo. So we Marie Kondoed our budget, and we look at it and say, does this bring us joy? If not, it's gone. If we do love it, it stays, and we prioritize it. We try to make sure we do it. So we do go out to eat. Now we have to bring it back to our house, but we try to get some takeout every once in a while. It's not like we're doing it every week. But once a month we go have a really nice meal. The things that make you happy though, I say spend your money on them, but make sure that you're also hitting your goals as far as what you're wanting to do for the future. So don't let your spending take over, future plans. And then finally, focus on reducing your expenses. As far as what this means to me is we spend money on the things that we're already spending money on. Let's take those. So when we first started this journey, we were spending a lot of money on the grocery store. In my area, it's called Hy-Vee. I know everywhere is a little different, but we have another version of a store right down the road called Aldi. And I'm pretty sure most people have heard of Aldi. And just by making that little move, and I was a major anti-Aldi person to begin with. I don't know exactly why. I think it was something from my childhood. But as soon as we made that move, we were saving $200 to $300 a month on food, getting very comparable products. Now, if it's something that I didn't think was good at Aldi, I don't love their peanut butter, so we don't buy their peanut butter there. We still buy, we don't drop the things that we love. We just focus on the things that we can control. We found cable for cheaper. We've got internet for cheaper. Sorry, not cable. We got rid of cable. We have a Netflix package. We got our internet package lowered. I am kind of an old man at heart, and I got mad that the trash kept raising their prices for every 3 months. And so I emailed their, CEO and customer service and a whole bunch of people along the way, and got my trash bill reduced by a pretty significant amount for every 3 months. But we look at every single thing on our line item and ask, what can we do to bring this down? And sometimes, and I don't want you to think that we just live this terrible life, because we do the things that we want to do, but we do those things all out. We're good on the things that we want to do. But if it's something that we don't want to do, then we cut it, or at least try to cut it down to as low as we can. So another thing, and this goes into a whole different topic, but I love personally credit card rewards, and I use those. I haven't made a clothing purchase in 10 years. We get all of our clothes for free. And then travel, we get most of our points for flights and hotel stays and everything like that. But again, you have to know your budget in order to be able to use credit cards, because if you overextend yourself, those points aren't going to be worth anything if you're paying interest. And you have to be able to pay your bill off every month in order to not pay interest. So number one, before you can move on to doing 457s, 403Bs, before you can try to start a Roth IRA, which I think is very important for people that have a pension, before you do all those things, you have to make sure that you have a budget and that you have your money in check. Okay. Now, I'm going to switch gears just a little bit. This was something that I had heard a lot of people wanted to talk about, and I love to talk about this. So the whole financial independence, retire early, I know it's like a massive movement. A ton of people know about it. Some people might not also. But one of the things that I cannot stand is when people say to me, well, or when they used to say to me, I guess I'm not in the world anymore, but as of May, when people would say, well, you only have 26 more years until you can retire. I'd look at them and shake my head, and I'm like, no, nobody's telling me when I can retire. I will tell myself when I want to retire. But so many times with a pension, people get stuck, or feel like they get stuck at least. And in my opinion, we shouldn't feel that way, because if we take control of our money, then they can't tell us when we can retire. We will be the ones that make that a priority in our lives. So you are not in charge of the pension. So the pension, again, everywhere is different. And I think it's probably set up that way in some aspects to, I don't know, each city or each state's different. But in Missouri, the way it works is it's rule of 80. And the way that works is your years of experience plus your age equals 80, and you can retire. They also have a 25 and out, where you can go 25 years and then be done at that point. Well, I was looking at this a couple of years ago, whenever I really started to go down this journey. And I was like, man, 25 years and out is that's the early retirement, right? I was 25 years. That's, I can't even fathom, I can't even think about next year right now, 25 years from now. And then I started thinking about the rule of 80. And for me, it would really only be 26 years from start to finish. So it really was about the same. And I believe you get 75% of your pension at that point. And, it was one of those things, like I said, grandparents, teachers, parents, teachers. So it was just kind of a world that I knew. And I was like, this is the way that it works, is you just ride it out and get your pension. But now that I've gone down this path, I realized, it opened my eyes, and it's like, no, you can be in charge of your money, and you can be the one that decides when you want to do things. And so one of my big talking points that I believe is that you create the options in your life. And the way that I describe this is, you've got your pay that you bring home. And, I'm going to do this for the people that can see right now. You got your pay over here, and your expenses are right here. So let's say your pay is, $2,000 or $3,000. Let's say $3,000, and your expenses every month are $2,500. Well, then you've got $500 worth of what I call your options. Those are the options that you can create in your life. The more that you can get your pay, the bigger that you can stretch that payout, and the smaller that you can reduce your expenses down. All you do is increase the amount of options that you have in your life. And so over time, you can really stretch some things out. Again, and I'm sorry that I don't know exactly everything that the way that the SLP world works, but with teaching, it goes, years of service and your education that you get. And that's how you increase the amount of money you make. And so for me, it was one of those things where we were looking at like, okay, let's start increasing our education. We did that. The amount of time that we worked, that happened naturally over time. And so then we did our budget, and we had been doing that for the last couple of years. Well, now we're at a point where we have these options, and I love having options. And so my wife and I, we were looking at things, and it's like, okay, number one, I wanted to start this business. Well, we were living on 50% of our pay. We were, and by the way, again, I want to make everybody very, very aware of this. We did not start off by, month one, it was not saving 50% of our income. Month one, we were saving, I think, $100 a month. So full transparency there. We did not start off by saying, wow, look at all this pot of money that we can get. We started by finding an extra $100 in our budget that we didn't know existed before that. And it was like, wow, look at that. We got $100 we can work with. And then a couple of months later, we had a little bit more and a little bit more. And we kept increasing income, and we kept reducing expenses. Right now, we can very easily live on about $3,000 a month, maybe $3,500, and that includes everything. And so it's one of those that where as time went by and we kept reducing expenses down, then it was like, I said that I wanted to quit my job and go after this business that I'd been really wanting to go after, and help people that, don't normally get as much help. I know a lot of advisors that I talk to they're willing to work with somebody if they have $250,000 in assets or something along those lines. And I said, that's not the world that I want to help. I want to help the people that are out there every day trying to help others. They're the people that are in schools working with kids. They're the people that just don't get a lot of attention a lot of times. But I also feel like this world of school district employees doesn't feel like they have a lot of options overall. Now, I know that there's a lot of different people in that boat. And so maybe you're like, no, I'm good on this part. And it's okay. That's great. But I know that overall, from talking to the amount of people I've talked to, a lot of people feel like that they can't do this. And I was the same way 3 years ago. And I'm telling you this, not so you can, feel happy for me or feel sad for me, but just know that if it's something that you want to go after, several years down the road by doing this journey, you could be in a similar position. And so again, it comes down to increase your income, decrease your expenses, and then that pot of money there that is left over, that's what you can go and do whatever you want with. And that's probably the most amazing part of having the budget. So my quote on here that I love, you can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending. So I know that a lot of people, I've talked to people that are in their 40s, 50s, even 60s. They're like, oh, well, I can't do this because insert reason. And I said, no. The thing is that where you're at today, is fine. Let's start there. You've made whatever choice has been made before. Let's try to move forward. And you don't need somebody to tell you that, oh, you didn't do this right. There are so many things that I didn't do right. I've got a ton of them. Okay. A whole list of them that I can tell you. I did a ton of things wrong from the financial aspect. I'm probably still doing some wrong as far as other people are concerned. But what I do know is that you can still change where you're headed to by making some small baby steps along the way. And they don't need to be drastic things. They're just small things. Then the very last thing here, and this kind of ties into that same idea. It's not necessary to do extraordinary things to get extraordinary results. And this is by Warren Buffett. I was talking with somebody recently. They're a young kid, I guess, for better lack of better word. But it's a 24-year-old getting started in their teaching career. And they were asking me just some general thoughts on some, life advice, more or less. And what I showed this person was that if they took $150 a month, now this is 24, and if they took $150 a month and put it into a Roth IRA, or they could do a 403B or 457, and just tracked something like the general stock market, S&P 500 or something like that, if they just tracked this general index fund that on average makes a certain percent, and we looked at all of these things, by the time that they were 65, that $150 a month was going to be worth over $800,000 at that point in time. $150 a month is not a whole lot, but what they have is they have a little bit of money, $150, and time, which we don't all have, because now I'm 35, so I don't have the same amount of time as a 24-year-old. And if you're 40, 50, or 60, you don't have the same amount of time as me. But what we do have is we have knowledge, we have the ability to change where we're headed right now, and we can make some of those small tweaks. Even if you don't get, $1,000 or $3,000 or $5,000 a month, maybe you can find $150 a month. And maybe that's what it takes to start you on this journey. And after you get your 150, maybe you can get to 200. And maybe you could take that 200 and somehow, by reducing some expenses, by changing your lifestyle in very small ways, it doesn't need to be drastic things, but maybe you can turn that into $500. And then, over time, by increasing your education, or again, that's where I don't fully know how the SLP world works, but I'm assuming it's probably similar. So increase your education, increase your years that you're working, you're going to continue to get paid more. And over time, you can do great things too. And so I think Warren, obviously he's Mr. Money. He knows a whole lot more than I do, but I think he nails this one because it doesn't take ridiculous things to get ridiculous efforts. It's just, you have to do something small and do it really, really well and be consistent. And over time, you're going to see some crazy results. I can promise you that. So what comes next? I love to hear feedback from people. So if you want to email me, my email is on the screen. There's also something that I'm working on because I've been working with clients one-on-one for the last 2 years now, but I haven't fully gone all into this business until as of May. I have nothing to do with the education world other than trying to help other teachers because I knew that it was a spot that I lacked. I wish that somebody would have been there to help me on my way because, oh man, I'm telling you, we made some mistakes. And I wish that, I've more or less a mentor that would have been like, hey, maybe slap me upside the head or something like that. But one of the things that I've found from talking to people is my course that I have, the program that I have is, it is fairly expensive. And so in hearing these different people and trying to take everything that I've heard and, adapt and change, I'm turning this program into a course, and it should be available, I'm hoping, by the end of September, but if not before then. And so if you're interested in seeing the Budget Teacher course, it's the same program that I use, but basically it's just 1/10 of the cost, but everything in there is going to be exactly what I do with my clients on a month-to-month basis, just like the program is laid out exactly the same as the course. Let's put it that way. And so if you go to this website and even if you just are interested in maybe finding out some more information, if you put your name and email in there, you become part of my mailing list, and I'll let you know whenever that course becomes available, because it is something that I'm working on right now. So I know that there's been a lot of questions that have popped up, and so I'm ready to answer those, I guess.
All right. Well, thank you so much for going through your presentation. This has been awesome to kind of get an overview of your ideas here on budgeting and retirement. I did do a survey. I'm going to kind of take over the screen for a second.
Sure. Let me stop sharing.
Okay, I gotcha. I was able to do it. All right, so let me go ahead and share my screen. I did send out a survey to a lot of the speech language pathologists in our group, and I just wanted to show you guys because it's kind of funny. People that would feel comfortable teaching a new employee about the options in your district. Can you guys see? 0%. None of us are comfortable with what we got. None of us. So, I mean, that was 25 people that went ahead and did the survey, but I mean, that says a lot. Like, nobody understands exactly what is out there. So really taking time to dig into this and understand it is important. A lot of the questions that came in had to do with, tell me how to figure out how much do I really need? What do I need to retire? Like, what is that number? And I know you kind of breezed by quickly the FIRE movement and how they kind of have a theory on, a number for retirement. So if you could talk a little bit to that, and also a little bit to, say I'm 55 and I'm getting closer, I'm not going to necessarily be able to aim for that same number. So would you kind of be able to walk us through
Sure.
what are the theories out there?
Sure. So going back to the budget, because again, for me, everything goes back to the budget. In order to financial independence, retire early, in order to know that at all, you really have to know what your expenses are. If you don't know your expenses, you don't even have a starting point. So by budgeting, you know exactly what you spend every month. Okay. And not just every month, I guess, but every year. And one of the things that I have, so I've developed my own budget. I'm an Excel nerd as well. So I've built my own. But one of the things that I have on the side of my budget is a total cost, a total amount that I've spent for every category all the way down. So like, my top category is always mortgage, and it tells me exactly what I spent at this point throughout the year. And then I have, bills, normal bills, groceries, going out to eat, my dog, my personal spend, my wife's personal spend, all these things, right? And then it tallies them all up at the bottom and it says total. That number, you have to know that in order to even know where you're trying to shoot for the future. So if you are spending, so I'm going to do a nice, easy number for me to calculate in my head. If you're spending $60,000 a year, that's your expenses, then right now today, you would need to multiply that by basically 25, and you would need $1.5 million. Now that number can really scare some people. Okay. That's a scary number. But again, I'm not necessarily thinking about tomorrow, because there's no way, me personally, I'll tell you this, there's no way I could retire tomorrow. But what I'm looking at is, what do I have to do from now until 10 years from now? And also, by the way, I'm not the type of person, and I actually was just talking about this earlier today. I love talking about money. I'm not the type of person, I'm not going to retire early in the sense that I think a lot of people think of that as, where a lot of people I've heard, they're like, oh, you're going on this path, you just want to like sit and watch TV and, I don't even know what they think. That's not what I want to do. I want to have it be a work optional type situation where I get to choose what I focus my energy and my time on. That's what I'm all about is, there's things that I can control, like currency and like money and stuff like that. There's things that I can't control. Time is ticking every minute, every hour, every day. It's going, and you're not gonna be able to get any of that back. So I want to basically buy back some of my time in the form of, if I can, be done with, essentially working by 45, and then I can focus on the things that make me happy. That's where I want to be. So I guess to answer your question, it's a very long-winded answer, but you need to have 25 times your expenses in an account that is going to be an invested account, more or less. Now, where I am not even really allowed to talk about money is what accounts you should go into. Now, I mentioned S&P 500 and index. That's a fund, but I'm not going to tell you which tickers or anything like that to look up, because I could get in some, legalities with talking about exact funds to be in. But you want to be in the stock market. You want to have 25 times the amount of money. And that's like a goal to shoot for. Now, 1.5 million today is not going to be the same as 1.5 million in 10 years whenever I'm 45. I'm 35 right now. So you also have to kind of think about that. But once you get to that pot of money where it's set up, the 25 times expenses theoretically should last you for the rest of your life. So what to, sorry,
can
go
I
ahead.
ask you for a second? No. So when you're saying 1.5 million, that is talking about if you're going to be digging into that and you're never going to really touch like the principal, that's living off of kind of the interest, right? Is
Yeah,
that
more or less.
So
So
you're not looking at.
In theory, you should only be pulling from your interest, more or less, or however you want to describe that money that's in there. But you should only be pulling from that. But also you have to account that the stock market's going to have good years and it's going to have bad years in there. So what that 1.5, so there's a study called the Trinity study. And the Trinity study is this one that says that it's called the 4% rule. And that's where we get to the 25 times earnings or expenses. But the 4% rule, so I'll break it down like this. The stock market over the last 100 years has brought returns of about 10% a year. 10% is not going to happen every single year, though. So they've dumbed it down just a little bit and said, we're going to take 7% as our number that we're using for the future. We can hit 7% every year, year after year after year. Now, 3% of that 7 is built in for inflation. So every year, if you have cash money sitting at home, every year that cash gets a little bit less valuable because the market, the world raises prices overall. Things cost more money today than they did back in, let's do it. Things are hard to see from day to day, but 1985 is when I was born. Things cost more today than they did in 1985. I think we can all agree on that. It's about 2 to 3% more per year, which they also try to tell us that they're raising our pay to meet inflation, but they actually don't do that. That's a whole nother thing. So that 4% rule is the stock market over a long period of time minus inflation gets you to that 4%. Now, you might be taking that. So those years that you are pulling that money out, maybe you're taking from less than 1.5 million some years. And maybe some years the stock market's done really well and you're taking that money that's coming out from more than 1.5 million. But that 1.5 is theoretically supposed to last forever and you would never need another penny. Now, you may, the last couple of years, you might, because we don't know what the stock market's going to do, be living on, your last 100,000 or something like that. So who knows? That's where I would say in a perfect world, 3% is like you cannot go wrong with taking out 3% of your total fund.
Great. Now, what are some of your favorite resources that you've looked at, whether it's podcasts, other books that you've read, blogs that you kind of frequent that might be motivating to those of us who are kind of greener in this area, who might need a kind of basics of retirement, basics of investing? What are some of your go-tos?
So one of them that I've been following for a little while, but I really love, and I know a couple people here know it as well, but the Teach and Retire Rich podcast, I think that those guys do a great job. So there's a couple of reasons. One is that they actually want to help teachers out, which is in the financial, and I keep saying teachers, school district employees. Mm-hmm. But that's a hard thing to find in the industry because there's so many people that I believe are looking for, a quick buck and sometimes, and Dan and Scott have talked about this quite a bit, but people will come in and, sit in the teacher's lounge and try to talk you into one of these overpriced annuity products. By the way, my thoughts on this, and I'm not licensed to sell anything. I'm not really probably licensed to talk about it a whole lot, but I feel like I can talk about this a little bit. If you have a pension program, a pension is an annuity. You're getting a set guaranteed amount for the rest of your life. So there's no reason to have a pension and an annuity. They do the exact same thing. So if you have a pension that you're going to be receiving later on in life, the other side of that should be invested into stocks and bonds that are going to go up with the current rate of the market, because otherwise what you're doing is you're basically just giving yourself two of the same thing. It's not as diversified as what it could be. Let's see. Other things I love. I love Choose FI, or Choose FI, I guess I always call it Choose FI. But I think that those guys are great resources. I started on them, a long time ago. Probably my very first person that I got involved with was this guy named Bobby Hoyt at the Millennial Money Man. And he's kind of gone down a different path now. Not necessarily a bad path, just his business has changed. But early on, he talked a whole lot about, he was a blogger that talked about money. And but I can credit him with putting these thoughts into my head of like doing things different, which I think is probably the number one thing that I want to get out there to everybody, is that the way that the world has talked about money for the last, as long as I've known it, is not the way that we always need to think about money. There are ways to do things differently and that's one of the things that I think the Choose FI guys do a great job of as well. And but there's a lot of podcasts. Book wise, Think and Grow Rich, I love. going back to blogs, by the way, the Millionaire Educator. Do you guys know
Yes.
him?
Yes.
Yeah.
He
He
will
does.
be speaking next month, I believe. So if you guys want to stay tuned. He's agreed to speak to us as well. He's amazing. I agree.
Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah.
So I actually use his stuff every single year. I go on there and so he puts out his IRS, but basically
Free
hacking.
money. Yeah.
Yeah,
Free money blog. Yeah.
yeah, his free money blog, and I've used it probably every year for like the last 4 years. And what he does is he shows you exactly what you can take for zero, like basically not paying the government, which is, you know, we can talk about that. But I think that trying to reduce your tax burden down as much as possible is something that everybody should be trying to do. By using some of his techniques and then using the 457 and some different avenues like that. Two teachers, so my wife and I both teachers, last year we paid 3.1% total taxes to the federal government. So, but it's just by knowing the rules and then bending them to, now, like, don't do anything illegal. I don't want to have anybody going to jail on my behalf. But if you know the rules, then you can play by the rules and bend them to your liking. So I use that free money calculator, and I go in there. I'm like, okay, let me see where I'm at. And then we start putting money into the different accounts. And yeah, there's so many things that once you know how to do it, that you can save a lot of money. So it's not even just saving money on like what we put in our accounts. We don't pay the government as much either. And so, yeah. Quit Like a Millionaire. I think that's the book you're giving out tonight. I loved that book. Are you still giving that out tonight, or am I?
Yes. Yep. I was going to just ask too. I was kind of going to lead you into that if you weren't coming up with it on your own. Remember the book we talked about? So you guys, Quit Like a Millionaire was a fantastic. Been my favorite book so far since I got into this. Also, and David and I got into talking about that, and I thought, well, why not raffle that off? So if you guys are interested in this story, she was phenomenal. She was born, I believe, in China.
Yeah.
To a very, very poor family who had no money for anything, no money for food, toys, anything. She literally would dig through medical waste piles to find things to entertain herself. And she went from that to moving to America and kind of learning the system and really going above and beyond. I mean, she saved something like 70% of her income and like moves around to like low income areas. So she's like extreme end of the spectrum, but just the way her mind works is really interesting. So if that's something you're interested in, I'd love for you guys to comment, because I would either send it to you as like a Kindle book or to your address if you're comfortable with that. So comment yes if you're interested in being entered in that raffle, and we'll do that in just a minute also.
She was also on the Choosify podcast, is where I first, that's how I came to find her. And then I had to go get her book, and yeah, she's great.
Great. I don't think I heard her. I'm gonna have to go back and listen. I've been binging all through coronavirus. I've been binging Choose FI, Teach and Retire Rich. And reading through a lot of these books. Oh, okay. Well, bye, Lauren. I appreciate the time that you've taken. I'm going to ask you one final question, and then we'll kind of go ahead and do our raffle here. But this is kind of a two-part question. One, you responded to on my Instagram was, what would you what would you like to tell your past self? Like, think about yourself when you were first getting into teaching. What would you like to tell yourself then that you didn't know, that you wish you had known then? And then part two will be, in 20 years, what are you hoping you can look back and say, okay, good job, David, you did right by us.
Yeah, those are good questions. So to go back to first year teacher David, probably the number one thing that I would say is that the way that most of the world is living is not the way that you have to live. Now, I've told you before, I've said it on here, I've made a lot of mistakes. Okay. I bought a brand new car my first year of teaching. I, was messing around in the day trading, stupid area of my life to try to beat the market. I lost like $5,000 one day. That's whenever I stopped and did not do that anymore. And that's actually what really started me down this journey. But living like other, I think Dave Ramsey says, but live like no one else, so that way you can live like, I'm gonna butcher that one. I don't know. Do anybody know that quote?
Oh yeah, live like no one else, so later you can live and give like no one else. Yeah.
There we go. So, yeah, I would tell myself that as now. I don't know if I'd be receptive at that point in my life, but I would hope so. But the other thing that I would say is that I know that a lot of people, especially ton of people that I talk to don't feel like people that are in the education world can do things differently. They think that they're stuck on this path of just, we have to come to work, we put in our 30 years or whatever it may be, and then we retire. There are other options out there, and it's possible. So that's the biggest thing that I'll just tell you, is that it is possible. 25 or 20 years from now, looking back, the thing that I want to be known for is I want to be the guy that has helped other teachers or people that work in schools to take ownership of their own finances in the world. And my thing is that I want to help other people take that control back, because I was there. I was so stressed out, especially, starting a new family. We didn't know where our money was going. We didn't have those resources. And so basically I want to be more or less a mentor to other people, that it doesn't have to be necessarily younger people, but just people that aren't quite comfortable with their money. And so, that's where I want to be in the future.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you for kind of mentoring us in the beginning of this. Tomorrow, I am going to be talking to Dan and Scott, so I hope you guys can come back for that. They have this fantastic podcast. I hope you guys kind of go back and listen to it from the beginning, because it has been just so eye-opening and kind of depressing at times, but it's also motivating to figure out what you're doing and get better at it. They have a fantastic website, 403B Wise, that they started to really look at your 403B options and figure out what's going on there. And they do have different podcasts kind of advertised here also. So David, thank you so much. I appreciate it. So again, I believe I sent
one last plug for, we do have a podcast out, the Budget Teacher podcast as well.
Oh, great.
We're
That's right.
2 episodes in right now. We just started it, but it's me and another math teacher that worked at the same school that I was at last year. And we decided that, we had this platform. We wanted to try to share information. So we're 2 episodes in. We've got 5 recorded, and so they're going to be every Thursday for the foreseeable future. We're going to be releasing those episodes. So
all right, let me show you guys his website, thebudgetteacher.com/podcast. There you go. If you could fill out the survey, I'd really appreciate it, because I'm starting to reach out to other people. I'm surprised how many people just are willing to help each other for nothing, just wanting to get the word out. So let me know what you'd like, what questions you still have, and I'm going to keep forwarding those along and putting these together as much as I can. They may not always be live. I might just record them and put them up on YouTube later. But I appreciate the time you guys took to come sit down and do this, and hopefully we can keep this going. All right. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, David.
thank you, guys.
All right. Have a fantastic day, everybody.